Greetings, viewers. I'm Shaquilla Roberts, and I have with me author Scott Martin. Today we will discuss Scott's two titles, Bringing the Tarot to Life and The Silent DoorKeeper, The Alchemical Tarot Shines a Light on COVID-19. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You had a previous life before becoming a book author.
Well, even before that, I used to work in this industry, in television, at ABC, and that was a long, long time ago, when the original Price is Right was here with Bill Cullen and the nurses and Virginia Graham and Girl Talk and all that. So I went into teaching because I had majored in theater all through college, and I studied theater from the time I was 8 or 9 years old. And so it was a natural thing for me to look for a job teaching theater arts. And then after that, I started mentoring graduate student teachers of theater at the City University of New York. And now I'm retired and do various and sundry things around the topic of tarot, for one thing.
Did you have any interest in tarot before retirement?
I did have interest. I was curious to see how this woman put these pictures down on the table and started telling me stories about me, and she had never met me. So that fascinated me because I've always had a certain belief in magic and believing that the impossible is possible. So that sparked my interest. So I walked into a diner one day, and you know how they had those magazines, catalogs that are free, that are piled up, and one was called Spirit. In that catalog was an advertisement for the Tarot School that is run by Wald and Ruth Ann Amberstone. And so I thought, well, that sounds like a place to go to learn tarot if it's a tarot school.
Right.
So I went and remained a student there really all through the beginning of COVID. And they continued to teach on Zoom in their living room.
Why did you start writing books on tarot?
Well, I never thought I would or could. And I have a friend, Sasha Graham, who I think has been on this show. And we were classmates together, actually, in the tarot school. And she said to me once, you know, you should write a book. And I said, you know, there's no more books about tarot to be written. I mean, everything that could be said about tarot has been said. And she said, no, you take two things that you love. You take the theater, which you love, tarot, which you've learned to love, and you put those things together, and that's your book.
Wow.
And I thought, well, I hadn't thought of it that way, but let me give it a try. Wald Amberstone, one of my teachers from the tarot school, opened up the world of tarot to me like this when he said, every card can answer every question from that card's point of view. Well, that demystified tarot to me completely.
Yeah, right.
Now, I talk mostly about the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. People may have different opinions if they're using different decks, but all I'm saying right now really has to do with what I learned using the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which is what the first book is based on.
You began writing about the cards a day using Robert Place's alchemical deck. Did you envision the exercise becoming a book, and how did that evolve?
This was in the height of the really early stages of the pandemic, but there were no vaccines out there. We were pretty much hibernating, and I was trying to come up with something to do. Now, I love Robert Place's Alchemical Tarot deck. It's really my favorite deck. I like it more than the Rider-Waite-Smith deck in terms of its artwork. Because I think, you know, Bob Wright, I love his artwork, and he has these bold images and figures, and there's not a lot of other unnecessary artwork around it, so that what he has there is all he wants you to have for that image, for what that card is trying to say. I decided that I would just randomly choose a card a day and I would put it up on Facebook. So I'd put the picture of the card, and I would write what that card might be telling us in terms of what's going on that day with the epidemic. And so that's how it started. But that I did not really intend for that to become a book, but it was really a way for me to share something on Facebook that I thought was worthwhile, for one thing, and also to help me learn the deck, because it's not the same as the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. I mean, there are some similarities. Mm-hmm. So I thought it'd be a great way for me to learn the deck, or at least get a little closer to learning the deck.
Right.
So every day after I read that card, I would put it aside so it couldn't come up again, so that I could really get through every card in the deck. And so I did a card a day religiously, 78 days in a row, which is how many cards there are in the deck. Robert Place, who's a friend of mine actually, began reading my posts, and he would add a comment here and there about what I was writing. And then after I finished the whole thing, I thought, let me see if I can work that into a book. And so I wrote a manuscript. I didn't tell Bob I was doing it, and I mailed it to him. And he was really surprised, very happily surprised, hadn't thought of having it be a book. And he really came on board with me, and we collaborated, and we wrote the Silent DoorKeeper.
Do we see any, books from you in the future? Do you have anything else coming up?
I've written another book. It's coming out this summer. Pamela Coleman Smith drew all of the pictures for the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And until recently, she was almost overlooked. They called the deck the Rider-Waite deck. Well, Rider was the publisher of the deck, and yet he gets top billing as the title of the deck, even though it was called the Rider-Waite-Smith. But Pamela Smith designed all of these cards, and Arthur Waite, who had a vision about the cards, gave her some pretty clear ideas about the majors, but really kind of left the minors to her imagination. She drew these cards and really didn't get the credit she deserved. But what made me so interested in her is that this deck came out around 1908. She was in the theater. She was an actress, and she was a set designer, and she was a costume designer. She worked with the great Ellen Terry in the English theater. So I couldn't help but think that her knowledge of theater didn't inform her in some way in the way she drew these cards, the direction she had these characters moving, if they were moving this way or that way, mm-hmm. if they were coming at us or their back was to us, that wasn't maybe consciously tapping into her theater training, mm-hmm. but I thought it was so inbred in the fabric of how she sees images that's what the book is about.
Scott's title, The Silent DoorKeeper, can be purchased through Robert Place's website. You can find Bringing the Tarot to Life at all fine bookstores and llewellyn.com. And I would like to thank you, the viewers, for tuning in. Until next time, you are watching Oculus Alchemy.